back, relax, and let's have a chapter chat. I'm your host, Jessica Foster, and today we're going to celebrate America and America's history with the novel A Founding Mother. And we have both of the authors who wrote this historical fiction masterpiece, Stephanie Dray and Laura Kamoie. Hi, ladies.
Hello.
I'm so excited to talk with you because I have enjoyed A Founding Mother so much. It's an excellent work.
Thank you. It's
Thank
really
you.
a labor
We
of
love
love
to hear
for
that.
us.
Yeah, I know that this was a work of love and you went through a lot to get it completed. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But this is a novel about Abigail Adams. So let's talk about your inspiration behind it.
Well, we had written a number of founding mothers before. We covered Thomas Jefferson's eldest daughter, Patsy, in America's First Daughter, and then Alexander Hamilton's wife in My Dear Hamilton. And we had been asked many times to write about Abigail Adams, and we had really avoided it because we are huge fans of the HBO special on John Adams. And especially because Laura Linney does an amazing job portraying Abigail. And we thought, oh my God, how are we going to compete with Laura Linney? Also, we wondered, how we could add anything else to the story. But as we considered the way the special unfolds, it's really about John. And Abigail is absent a lot of the time. And we wondered, what was she doing while he was away? And as it turns out, quite a bit. And so that really made us convinced that we should write the book about Abigail, especially in time for the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and that we should put her front and center.
And you've done an excellent job doing that. And Laura, for our listeners out there that aren't really familiar with Abigail Adams, and I hope that most are, but let's talk a little bit about what you dive into in the book and about Abigail.
Well, in A Founding Mother, we're really telling the journey that Abigail takes throughout her life, from a young wife and mother to an ardent patriot to a world traveler, and ultimately to First Lady and political advisor to not just one, but two presidents. And it was part of the reason that we chose the title of Founding Mother, because she's really raising, defending, and protecting her small family right alongside of raising and birthing and ultimately doing things to protect the new nation that she and John are both founding together.
And she was very influential in our country. And I don't want people to forget that. So that's why I hope that everyone will pick up this book, because you will learn something.
Yeah.
Yes, it's important to remember the ladies.
Yes. That's our mission in general, remember the ladies. But we were surprised by some of the degrees of her influence as well. And some of it was based on the comparison of what she observed while they lived in Europe for 5 years, looking at things there and deciding they were or were not appropriate, and then coming back as initially the second lady to Mrs. Washington in President Washington's administration, and beginning to implement the social side of politics, what historians would later call parlor politics. And while some of that seems perhaps small, if you think about our founding documents, they may set out the major ideals of our country and the big structures of our government, branches of government, officers, how long they serve. None of the day-to-day is actually spelled out. So they're making it all up from scratch. And Abigail is playing a big part in establishing a role for the ladies.
And many would say that she was ahead of her time.
We would agree with that. She was a big proponent of women's rights and women's education in particular. That's a theme that she returned to again and again in her letters to her husband. She was also against slavery. And those things would not be addressed for a very long time in our country. So she was definitely ahead of her times.
And because those were things that she really couldn't do anything about on her own, Abigail has a real knack for doing what she can for the people that she can. And perhaps the most poignant example of that, and what she intended as her last action and her last words, was in a time when women really weren't able to do this legally, she left a will, and she left her quite considerable sum of money that she had made from her entrepreneurial activities going all the way back to the Revolution to the other women in her life, with the belief that you couldn't have real independence without having financial independence.
And the fact that she was an entrepreneur during that time, too, as a female, that's pretty impressive.
Unexpected, but also required of her, because John, when he was away doing the business of the country, he could not practice law. And that is how he made most of his money, which meant that it was up to Abigail to figure out how to keep the family afloat. And she did this by starting a little business. It began with selling pins during the Revolution. And that, you might have heard the little phrase pin money before. Yeah. She earned her pin money, and she kept it largely a secret from her husband, which also surprised us while we were writing the book. She then magnified those savings by investing them in securities and land. She also had a mercantile business that grew out of it. She was selling handkerchiefs and gloves and scarves and things like that. And because of her wise investments, the Adamses emerged from the Revolution relatively financially stable, where a lot of other families were financially ruined.
Amazing. And as far as your research for this novel, you had a lot that you could dive into and garner some things from. So let's talk a little bit about that.
One of the two things that Abigail is best known for are the huge collection of letters that she and John wrote to one another. The many years that they were separated in their marriage were obviously very difficult for them, but have resulted in an incredible resource for us of over 1,000 letters between them, which really allowed us to establish her voice and let her speak as much as possible in her own words. Those letters and others from particularly the founding fathers, but also their family and friends and wives, are available to people everywhere for free on the National Archives website at founders.archives.gov. And the amazing thing for us about them is not only are they digitized, but they're also transcribed, which means that they are completely searchable. And they're annotated, so they explain a lot of things that might be referenced in the letters in a way that's such a godsend for researchers.
And how do you decide what to include? And with historical fiction, how do you decide when you can veer off and when you need to stay completely true to history?
So this is a choice that always faces every historical author. And the reason for this is that real lives don't conveniently fall into the shape of a story. There are often boring parts in real people's lives, or coincidences that actually mean nothing. Sometimes that gun on the mantelpiece really doesn't go off. But when you're writing a book, there are expectations, and it's your job to make sure that the reader is entertained and moved and educated, and to keep the story going. And so for those reasons, we have to often exclude things, usually lots of people who otherwise might be in the lives of our characters. For example, in this novel, we did not include Abigail's niece, Louisa, who was a huge part of her life and her legacy, and ultimately the biggest recipient of her largesse upon her death. But we didn't know very much about Louisa. It would have meant our having to invent a character from whole cloth. And she didn't add much to the story that we didn't already get from other directions. So in that case, it would have just added more pages for not a lot of payoff. And so poor Louisa gets cut out of the story, but she is acknowledged in our author's note. And that's where we always explain to the readers what we left out, what we changed, why we changed it, what our guesses are about some historical mysteries based on the evidence that we know. And we love writing those author's notes. And as far as we know, readers also love reading them. So we make sure that they're meaty and you're getting your money's worth.
I love an author's note. I really do. I think that it adds so much depth, and people are always intrigued by the process.
Absolutely. Yeah, we get the questions about the process. Every time we speak to readers, they love knowing about the research. They love knowing how we make the choices to dramatize, how we work together. And we love talking about that part of it too, because we really believe that historical novels can make real historical contributions. And I think readers understanding just how much research is going into them, how based on the actual documentary record our novels are, allows them to really grasp the significance of the people we're writing about and what they're learning about them.
Well, I think it makes history more accessible to people, more digestible. And in a world where sometimes I think we get away from history when we shouldn't get away from history, but a lot of times we do. And I don't even think that it's taught to the level that it should be in schools and universities. Historical fiction really does play a pivotal role.
Yeah, I think anything that gets people interested in history. Oh, I'm sorry. I think anything that gets people interested in history is all to the good. And I think historical novels fall into what historians refer to as public history. And that is doing history in and with the public. And that's museums and monuments and historic houses and all the like. And I think novelists have a role to play in that. It brings history to life in a way that then often encourages people to go out and research the actual, history, to go read, was this true? Is this a real person? And I know I do that when I read historical novels or watch historical TV shows. I love to sort of pause and research and then watch again and then pause.
I love that too. And I think as a journalist, that's why I love historical fiction so much, because you have that real factual element, but then you have a little fiction mixed in. So I enjoy it a lot.
Well, it's our favorite genre as well. We don't just write it, we also read it and we watch it. And while Laura is one who will Google while the show is on, I race through the show so that I can Google at the end so that I don't I don't get any spoilers, because I have ruined shows for myself that way before.
Well, you're more patient than I am, I guess.
Well, ladies, I know that you have formed this friendship. How did you originally become co-authors together?
We had known each other. I think we've known each other for about 15 years now. And we had met through a writers' organization here where we live in Maryland. And we often went to conferences and things together. And that's where this idea first began. We were sitting at a dinner at a conference, and I was still at that point a professor of history at the United States Naval Academy, and I happened to be teaching some small senior seminars on Thomas Jefferson. So at the dinner, we got to talking about Thomas Jefferson and how interesting he was and what it might be like to write a novel about him, but also how challenging that would be, because seemingly everything has been written about Jefferson. We know so much about his life. But we realized we didn't know about Jefferson as a father, just as a founding father, and curious about what his daughters might allow us to tell about him and the era. We raced back to Stephanie's hotel room at this conference, and we were up until the middle of the night, 3 or 4 o'clock, on our computers, calling out facts that we were finding to each other. And we decided that night that we would write a novel about Patsy Jefferson, and we would do it together, despite the fact that neither of us had ever co-authored anything before. So, not a little bit of hubris was had that night. But it ended up being such a dynamic and rewarding partnership that we've now done it several more times and just really enjoy the process of getting to work with someone, because no one's ever as interested in your novel as you are yourself. But when you have a co-author, you have someone else that you can sort of geek out with when you find interesting and really useful facts.
Well, and it's so fun to work with someone who has the same goals and aspirations as you do.
Yeah, I mean, we went from one novel that we thought would be interesting. At the time, we had no greater plan to write additional novels. It was just this one thing we were really passionate about. But as we've continued, we really feel called to remember the ladies, to highlight just how relevant the Revolutionary era is to modern society. There's a famous quote that I'll paraphrase by a founding father named Benjamin Rush, where he says that the Revolutionary War is over, but the American Revolution is not. And I think that's still a relevant sentiment today. So we've been carrying this mission through all these novels and all our events, out talking with people, and we feel really strongly about it.
And Stephanie, you were saying that this was not the easiest project for the two of you to complete.
This one was definitely the most challenging. We both faced some health challenges. Laura's were far more serious than mine. She underwent a double mastectomy after a cancer diagnosis, and then had a stroke. But thankfully, she is recovering, and that is a blessing that I am grateful for every day. I'm also on the mend, and though much of this manuscript was written with me on my back with a foot elevated, we managed to get it done, and we're very proud of it.
Ladies, I'm so glad that you were able to push through and get this completed, because this work needs to be out in the world, because it really is fabulous. And Laura, I know that that is something so difficult to go through. I am a breast cancer survivor myself.
Oh,
so I know that process.
Yeah. And, it was kind of surreal. I think it's always surreal when you get a cancer diagnosis, but to be then at the same time working on a book about someone in the 18th century and to encounter that as part of the history was really unique and a unique experience. It's not something that you see all the time. So we've had a lot of fun synchronicities in our work where we guess at something and then it comes true, or something we're writing about is actually similar to what's in the news of the day. But this was, it was really surreal to both be experiencing it and writing about it. And Nabby Adams's breast cancer surgery and experience has become a very important part of medical history. And also, I'm only 18 months out from my surgery, so I'm still sort of new as a survivor, but I feel very strongly about breast cancer awareness advocacy. And I think there are some fun opportunities for us with this book because of the subject matter to, not only celebrate women and the country, but also to use it to spread some awareness, because 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer. And that's a huge number of women.
It is. And I try to get that message out to women all the time. I was 35 years old when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I attribute to a self-exam, because I had always done self-exams. My mom had always taught me to do those every month. And I felt something that was a little odd 1 month. And so my doctor said, well, let's go ahead and do a mammogram, even though you're not 40 yet, not time. This was when I was only 30. We did the mammogram. It ended up being a benign fluid-filled cyst. But because of that, it put me on the track to get yearly mammograms. And I almost did not get my yearly mammogram the year that we found the breast cancer. Because I was like, well, I'm not 40 yet. But everyone's risk profile is different. And as women, we cannot forget about ourselves. Life gets busy. And thank goodness I had that mammogram because we were able to find it at a very, very early stage.
Well, I can echo your experience of the importance of mammograms because I was also sent for a suspicious lump, which turned out to be completely benign. But what the mammogram found were microcalcifications that turned out to be invasive cancer that you would never have felt. So had I not had the mammogram, by the time it was my next scheduled mammogram, those could have been a much more serious stage of cancer. So the importance of mammograms cannot be overstated.
No, and I know a lot of times there's some misinformation out there about screening. So I just want to reiterate that mammograms really do save lives. And again, that's why it's Oh, go ahead.
I'm very happy that you're well. I'm very happy that I'm well. And that's the power of getting early treatment, is that we're here to tell the story.
Yes, I always say that it's a sisterhood. It's not one that we chose to be in, but it is a sisterhood nonetheless. And again, we're going on that theme of women, empowering women and getting the word out about women's issues, which is so important. So bringing it right back around to a founding mother, is there something that you hope women in particular get out of this book?
We do. We were very conscious of the fact that we were writing this book, that it would come out in 2026. On the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and that this is an anniversary that is happening in a very polarized political environment, and one in which a lot of women are worried about their rights and their future and the opportunities of their daughter, and an anniversary in which many Americans may have conflicting thoughts about what the national mission is and whether or not we're all on the same page and what we should pursue next and where we should go. And we knew that no one could speak better to that than Abigail Adams. She is very forthright and direct and speaks about the aspirations of this nation and what it means to be an American, and that every generation has to fight for these liberties anew. It's not just something, the nation wasn't a machine that you could flip on a switch and then it would go forever forward. It is something that requires participation of every generation, ordinary men and women, particularly women. Since we have the right to vote, we need to exercise it and use it wisely. So we are hoping that women take this from this message from our novel and are inspired by Abigail Adams.
And you're on book tour now. When you are out and about and talking to readers, what is the main question that they're asking you?
Oh, this is a good question. We always get questions about our process. We get questions about the research. And I think people also want to know how Abigail became Abigail, how Abigail became this self-possessed, confident, articulate person. And we've thought a lot about that, and it seems part nature and part nurture. She wasn't formally educated, but she was the daughter of a parson, and she and her sister had access to the library at the parsonage and read deeply and broadly and debated what they were reading with one another. And she was someone who traveled the world and was a keen observer of the people around her and learned a lot from those experiences. But also part of it was just who she was. She was from a young age someone who was very self-possessed. And we admire that very much about her. And I think it's what makes her such a great role model.
Yeah, I would agree. And as far as process, because I know people are very intrigued by that, would you write together or would one of you write a chapter and then the other write? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Sometimes we do write together. When we started with America's First Daughter, we had never collaborated before and we were nervous about how this should work. So we actually opened like a Google chat video and we would write together. And so while I might be writing chapter 1 and Laura might be writing chapter 2, we had all the books out on our tables near us. And so we'd be reading and researching and interrupting each other to say, hey, have you looked at this page? Because there's a really great resource for you and your chapter on that. Now, for the next book, My Dear Hamilton, our deadline was a little tighter. We did not have the luxury of writing together and taking our time and having quite so much fun. So we had to divide that up sort of into large chunks. And oftentimes the way we determine, who's going to write what depends on what we do and don't like. For example, I really hate gross scenes and she loves all the gross stuff. So, I'm not saying I haven't written about, dysentery or disgusting things, but in general, if I can foist it off on her, I'm happy to do so. And so we have a lot of fun figuring out who's going to write what. In this one, because of our illnesses, things worked a little different. And I'm sure in the next project, and there will be a next project, things will probably work differently again.
Yes, because both of you are on the mend and you are healed as well, right, Stephanie?
Yes. My injuries were largely of my legs. So I was able to write as long as I could do so upside down, which is now a talent that I have.
Hey, you know what? We learn something new every day, don't we?
As authors, you have to have more talents than you expect when you go into the business. It's not all writing.
No, especially now, because you have to be so active on social media and all of those things. And I think readers really want that connection now more so than they ever have before. Would you agree?
100%.
Yes, absolutely.
Things like learn graphics, accounting, publicity. The number of hats that we wear is ever expanding.
Well,
I think readers really enjoy getting to know authors because it makes them even more invested in the books and in the author's success. And then, you end up forming friendships with readers who come to not just one of your events, but several over years till they become, friends in the real world and not just online. And I think that kind of community is something that people are searching for and is something that books and libraries and bookstores can really offer.
And I heard you say there will be another project.
I did. We cannot yet say what it will be on, but we are looking at another founding mother.
Ooh, and are you already working on that together?
We have done initial research into it. We've done a lot of brainstorming. We've talked to our editor about the idea. So we're in the early stages, but we have dived in just a little, but we haven't yet gone all the way down the rabbit hole.
Well, I know it will be excellent, just like a founding mother. Ladies, keep up the great work. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Chapter Chat. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Happy reading.